Last of all, we'll talk about the balance. The balance of the image is all about ensuring that the visual weight of the image is evenly displaced, making sure that you don't have something that's so heavy on the left-hand side or up top or whatever. So, as an example, this is a very unbalanced scene. Okay, we've got this very dark contrasted chair on the right hand side there and nothing on the left hand side. So if this image had weight to it and it was, I don't know, sitting on a scale, it would be leaning to the right hand side. So just like a real, where real weight is involved, if you can imagine that there's a line down the center here, it's essentially like that becomes the fulcrum. So you need to have something to balance that out. And the smaller it is, then the further you pull it out to. But in any case, we've now just got one giant object here on the right-hand side, way too heavy, and nothing on the left-hand side. So you wouldn't want to have this sort of orientation in your image, but if you did, you need to balance it by putting something like a little chair on the left-hand side there. And now that becomes a balanced composition. You wouldn't do that though, you just focus entirely on the chair and crop it right down. But if you were to go with this exact, proportions, this is what you'd have to do. So that's essentially balance in a nutshell. It's ensuring that the weight is balanced. So visual weight, when we talk about visual weight, we're essentially talking about the things we mentioned with the focal elements. So we've got size, high contrasting elements, the saturation, that adds more visual weight to things. Faces, that's a huge point of visual weight. It's just so striking, your eyes are like drawn to it, as well as figures, body figures as well. So all these things add lots of weight to an image, so you then need to balance that out. Here's an example of an unbalanced image. I completed this image a year or two ago, I think. I'm hoping it was longer, but it's unbalanced. Your attention is drawn right over here to this building where there's this bright light, so much bright contrast over here, as well as a figure which adds to it as well, and then not much on the right hand side. Now you might think, oh, we've got some things here, we've got some boxes and whatever, but it's not as bright. So a great way to check if it's balanced, just going based off the values of light in your image, is to turn up the contrast. And when you do that, you can see that it's you've got this big bright patch on the left hand side there. And if you also turn up the blurriness value, you can see very clearly that it's very, very, very unbalanced. So this is essentially what's called the squint test. If you squint your eyes, you essentially get this result. And you can try that with any image. And that's just if you're going based off the values of things. But you also got to include things and remember things like saturation, the faces, characters, things like that can also add extra weight. But in this instance, if you wanted to balance this out, you would essentially need to put something around about here. Maybe I don't know, like a red engine or an extra lamp or something like that to counter that extremely bright weight over there. And that would essentially do the trick. So that's what is needed. All right, here's a better example, a more recent one, thank goodness. You've got this extremely bright crystal gem right in the foreground there in a very dark surrounding. Now this would be really bad generally. It's a really bad way to like completely unbalance a scene. But to counter that, in the background over here, we got old Jimmy Hiker standing in the cave entrance, and that alone, him as a silhouette against the sky background, as well as the fact that he's a figurine, adds a certain amount of weight to it as well. So much weight that it counters against this brightness in the foreground there. So without him there, this would be drastically unbalanced. But with him there, the fact that he's got so much weight as well, visually, it helps to balance that out. Hoping that makes sense. All right, another example here, we've got a really large, huge looking monster dude, which would, usually throw the image out of balance. But we have another character, a human girl, which has a lot of visual weight to it as well, which balances him out. As well as that, you've got a bright window up there against the moon, a lot of contrast there, which would make this scene a little bit unbalanced if it weren't for this lampshade down there. Now, this is a complex example, and if you're looking at this and thinking like, I don't know this, I can't figure this out, like this exact science of balancing this and that and luminance and contrast and saturation, Don't worry about it. It's something that you will pick up as you go. So even though this might look confusing, like, you don't understand all of this stuff just yet, the more you work with it, you'll automatically begin to start implementing this stuff in your scene. So you'll add a person, and then you'll go, all right, I need to add a little box over here to the right-hand side. You'll just immediately, instinctively start adding this stuff. So I just wanted to add that to soothe over any stress you might have over this. This is the best example I can think of for a balanced scene. Right here, we've got this obviously giant, demanding, scary looking robot with a huge bright light shining out of its camera or turret, whatever that is, which has got a lot of weight to it, heaps of weight. However, on the left-hand side here, we've got a little boy. The fact that he's human, he's a figurine, as humans, we're instinctively, drawn to figurines. So he has a lot of weight as well. Even though he's not bright and contrasty as the robot is, he is a silhouette, so there's contrast there, and he's a clear figure. So he really acts as a really great balancing point for that giant robot there. As well as that, we've got this huge overpass over the top there, which would act to unbalance this if it weren't for this cleverly placed shadow across the ground there. So as you can see, a really deliberate and very clever way of balancing a really complex scene. And that is balance. So just to go over it again, the visual weight of an image includes the size of the object, the contrast of the object, saturation, if it's a face or a figure, that has even more visual weight. So all of those things have high visual weight, and that's something that you want to try to balance out throughout your scene.